Dr. Ashison here, and we're still talking about Chapter 12, Self and Identity. This is our third part of the video lectures where we're going to be focusing on identity formation. So Erik Erikson proposed that identity formation and exploration is really happening in adolescence. He says that during adolescence, adolescents examine who they are, they examine what they're about, and they examine where they're going in life. And they use these to kind of help form this sense of identity. And an identity crisis, according to Erikson, is happening in this when you're experiencing temporary distress, when there's kind of too many options, there's too many experiments, kind of not really necessarily knowing who they are, that identity crisis, and it can be uncomfortable. But that they'll go through this problem of identity crisis and they'll have a resolution for it. So let's watch a little bit of a video that talks about this.
A major challenge in the development of self occurs during adolescence, the task of forming an identity. The attainment of a strong sense of identity is a process rather than a simple step on the path toward adulthood. The following adolescents, when asked what they have planned for their lives, illustrate significant individual differences in identity development.
I'm trying to achieve my goals, go to the league. I really want to just play that and get that one. All I want is one game in the NFL, just one. I don't care if I get hurt, anything.
I think I want to go pre-med. I think I want to study pre-medicine and eventually become a doctor. But at the same time, I want to spend a semester abroad. I want to do a semester-long community service project in some foreign country. I want to go on those kind of foreign aid projects. I want to spend a semester here, spend a semester there, do this for a semester. I want to minor in law and major in something else. I want to get French. At the same time that I want to slow down and not rush myself, I want to be able to absorb much more so that I can, again, see what I like, see what I don't, and make better choices based on that.
Yes, actually, I've been thinking about it since I think I was 6, and I'm aiming to be on Broadway.
So you could hear there was a lot of different kinds of things. Some people had definitely decided on something. Some people had really kind of decided on that, and they said that since she was 6, whereas other people were kind of really exploring these things, trying to figure out, and kind of they were contradictory. So the guy in the middle, he was like, I want to slow down, but I want to speed up, and he was it was contradictory in what his goals were. And we'll see that this is kind of indicative of that crisis. There's too many options. You heard him list off all the options that he had. That's a lot, and so that can be a form of distress, an area of distress, because there's so many choices. So in identity versus role confusion, according to Erikson, identity is defining who you are, what you value, and your direction in life. This includes things like the commitments to vocation, your job, personal relationships, sexual orientation, ethnic groups, ideals. And exploration leads to a resolution of this identity crisis, according to Erikson. So by exploring the different options, that this situation, this distress can be resolved and really have a comfortable sense of self and a comfortable identity. However, if you don't properly resolve this identity versus role confusion, you can end up in role confusion, according to Erikson. He says that these individuals really lack a direction and a definition of self. And this usually happens, he says, because of restricted exploration during adolescence. So the last individual who was like, I've been planning on it since I was 6, I'm going to be on Broadway, may come up with a problem later on if that doesn't seem to fit with who she really thinks she is and who she wants to be and the direction she wants to go. She doesn't sound like she's doing much exploration. And so that's really leaving opportunity, according to Erikson, for role confusion. This can also be involved, earlier psychosocial conflicts are not resolved. So Erikson's is a stage theory, and he talks about these psychosocial conflicts and resolutions. And what he's saying is earlier issues haven't been resolved, that their individual's not going to be able to properly form an identity because they'll be stuck in this role confusion. He says this can also happen if society restricts your choices. So if you're identify as female and you're a culture that doesn't allow females to make a lot of choices about vocation, about roles, that can lead to a sense of role confusion. If you want to go into a position that's typically dominated by the opposite gender of you, and society kind of is restricting those choices, whether you're male or female, that can be problematic. According to Erickson, that these societal things can restrict view too. And notice that he's talking about sexual orientation and ethnic groups and relationships and vocation and ideals in here. And so you can see how society is going to have that does restrict some choices based on these pieces, these facets of identity. He says if you don't resolve this, if you don't end up with an identity, if you don't solve this identity crisis, and you end up with role confusion, that you really are going to be unprepared for the various stages of adulthood. And this will result in negative feelings and poor psychosocial adjustment, according to Erickson. So Marcia also looked at identity statuses, and she talked about 4 different kinds of statuses of identity. Identity achievement, identity moratorium, foreclosure, and diffusion. Identity achievement is really commitment to values, beliefs, and goals following a period of exploration. So it's going to be very, very similar to Erickson's resolution of identity, because there is that period of exploration and then there's a commitment made to that sense of self, to these characteristics that you're identifying as. Moratorium would be exploration without commitment. So this is going to be different than Erickson. He's saying that you explore and you figure it out, or you don't explore and you don't figure it out. He doesn't leave an opportunity for this, as Marcia does, for this exploration without commitment. And we'll talk about this a little bit more too. Identity foreclosure is commitments in the absence of exploration. So this is going to be one of those role confusion things like Erickson talked about. It's going to be very similar to that, where it's the girl who planned to be on Broadway since she was 6. This commitment without exploration. And then identity diffusion is an apathetic state that's characterized by both lack of exploration and lack of commitment. And what's nice about Marcia's model of the statuses of identity is you can kind of see these very nicely in a table. So we have levels of commitment and levels of exploration, which gives us kind of a grid of these things. So an individual who has a high level of exploration and has a high level of commitment is going to have that identity achievement. They've looked around, they've figured it out, this is who they are. They've achieved that identity. Whereas someone who has a low level of exploration and a high level of commitment is identity foreclosure. This is going to be more indicative of situations where individual believes what their parent believes because that's what they were told and that's what they were taught. They never looked into anything else. This could be about religion. This could be about politics. This could be about anything. This could be about career choices. Really anything that's seen as a defining feature. A lack of exploration, but yet a high level of commitment to these things. We're going to see that can often not be one of the better choices for psychological adjustment. And we see that this can be indicative of authoritarian parenting, whereas identity achievement can be indicative of authoritative parenting, which we'll talk about when we get to our parenting chapter in a couple more chapters. Identity moratorium is that high level of exploration but not deciding. So that's kind of, the person who's had 15 different career choices and never really has committed to any kind of back and forth, not really deciding kind of who they are and who they feel to be. Whereas identity of diffusion is really just kind of apathetic. So we don't really care to look, and we really don't care to decide. Kind of more of that floater kind of idea, that this is a person that really doesn't have a high level of interest in kind of who they are. And these sorts of things. We'll see that identity achievement is going to result in the healthiest psychological adjustment, where the other three can have differential negative consequences in terms of psychological discovery. We'll see that the two healthiest really primarily are identity achievement and moratorium, that level of exploration is very, very important to psychological well-being. Of the two, that is the more important of the facets of identity status. Whereas identity foreclosure and diffusion, again, are going to have more negative consequences. So again, identity achievement or moratorium, this has this information cognitive style. And that's when making decisions and solving problems, they seek relevant information, they evaluate, they reflect, and they revise their views as needed based on this new information. So you think you have a view on something, you go and you read about it, and you can revise what you thought. Okay, well, this is what I thought was going on, but really this is what's happening. And so now I think something differently. And so we see this information gathering cognitive style is very, very beneficial in terms of psychological well-being. And again, this is about gathering information when making decisions and solving problems. So this is not just voting. We're in a political year, a political cycle. This is not just voting for who your parents voted for because that's what they've told you. This is going out and figuring out kind of who you think has the ideas and that are for this country that are most in line with your ideas. This is going and exploring that. And even if you don't really get to an achievement level on that, that information cognitive style is really, really healthy in terms of psychological well-being. Where identity foreclosure tends to be more dogmatic and flexible cognitive style. So this is going to be internalizing beliefs and values of parents and others without evaluating and without resisting information. So I remember the first time there was someone and their mother was having a political debate, and it was the mom was on one side and had raised her son to be Republican, and the son was on the other side, and he was exploring his different political options, and they were having a conversation. And so he was talking about voting for a third party candidate, and the mom was definitely voting for the Republican candidate. And this is years ago. This has nothing to do with the current election. And they got in an argument. And later, the mom said, I just raised him to be a Republican. I didn't raise him to think, to explore these things. I raised him to be a Republican. She was hoping for this dogmatic, inflexible cognitive style. She was hoping for this internalizing her beliefs. And that's not saying that that woman hadn't gone through information gathering cognitive style on her own. But she wanted her son to have the same beliefs as her. And she was, even if that meant, at least in that utterance she said, even if that meant a lack of exploration. She was more hoping for this inflexible cognitive style, kind of just internalizing those values and beliefs without evaluation of their own. This also happens with resisting. We also see in this cognitive style, individuals resist information that threatens their position. So an example of this would be the anti-vaxxers, the people that are against vaccination. A lot of these people are so against vaccination that you cannot give them any information to change their opinion. There's literally nothing that you can do because it's so dogmatic and inflexible that new information is not going to change their opinion. They'll just come up with something that's wrong with that information instead of having to adapt and reflect and revise their views as you would with an information cognitive style. So we'll see that, again, this information gathering cognitive style is more beneficial to psychological well-being than this more dogmatic, inflexible style is. Identity diffusion has also a negative cognitive style. It's a diffuse avoidant cognitive style, kind of just avoiding dealing with personal decisions and problems, and instead kind of just allow the situational factors to dictate their responses. So really just kind of an avoidance of it in general, and not really any level of exploration, not really any kind of commitment to ideas, but just decisions would be based on the situation. These are going to be, in terms politically, these are going to be people that aren't voting at all, and aren't interested in voting, because they don't really see it as an issue. And this isn't somebody that is like conscientiously objecting, that they've explored and they've got all this information and there's all these reasons why they're not voting. This is somebody that's not voting because they just don't care. They don't see that this is necessarily an important component of this. And I talked a lot about political styles. This doesn't have to be in reference to politics. It can be in reference to religion. It can be reference to moral ideas. It can be reference to different justice ideas, social ideas, really anything that these ideals and how we see the world, it can be related to any of those. And so we'll see that this is also a negative cognitive style as well that affects psychological well-being. Other factors that affect identity development include, again, that personality. So having a flexible, open-minded personality, being able to kind of take in that new information, have that more cognitive style that allows you to kind of revise and resubmit your ideas, having that open-minded, having a level of flexibility in that. We see that child rearing practices affect it too. We talked a little bit about how we typically see authoritative parenting being really responsible for identity achievement. Also, we see children that are very securely attached are going to have this as well. So these children feel attached and they can voice their opinion. They're going to be more likely to have moratorium or achievement identity status. Individuals who have identity foreclosure are going to be more, again, those authoritarian upbringings where they have these close attachments, but they don't feel that they can voice their opinions. They don't feel that they can discuss these things with other individuals and with their parents. And then diffused, typically we'll see in terms of individuals that are with diffused personality, diffused identity, identity diffusion, typically have lower warmth relationships with their parents, and also low communication. So they haven't been given an opportunity to really learn about these decision makings, to really learn how to evaluate and explore information. They haven't been given those opportunities, and so oftentimes we'll see this same level of apathy kind of be generational because of that. We also see that peers and friends can be really beneficial. The more diverse their interactions, the better. And so we'll see that children that have diverse interactions, and this can be diverse in terms of ethnicity, this can be diverse in terms of economic status, this can be diversity in terms of gender or sexual orientation. Any of these things we see are more beneficial because they're allowing opportunities to be more flexible and to be more open-minded. They're allowing an environment that can kind of create exploration without necessarily having to go out and explore. So in terms of religion, if you have friends of a bunch of different religions, you learn about them through your relationship with your friend. That makes exploration a lot easier than if you have to go out and find that information yourself. So we see that these peers and friends can really create situations where exploration is a lot easier, and create situations where there are more opportunities for diverse trains of thoughts, diverse ideas. Schools and communities. These are schools and communities that have rich opportunities for exploration. Again, this can be inclusive of things like diversity. When I was in high school, my high school represented 80 different nations. And growing up in middle school and elementary school, it was that same school district that was a very, very diverse school district in Houston. And that provided a lot of opportunities for exploration for the students in that school. When you have that level of diversity, you have at your fingertips exploration, theoretically, for 80 different nations, 80 different cultures. You have these sorts of things. And to be able to really navigate in that system, you have to have a level of flexibility and open-mindedness. You have to kind of adapt to that situation. And so we see these kinds of communities that provide these opportunities for exploration are very beneficial. It doesn't have to be a diverse school for this to happen. It can be a school that creates other situations that allow for exploration. So my school just kind of fell into it because of its diversity. But other schools, they can create environments for this exploration. But again, it's all of these come back to fostering an environment that allows for exploration, that allows individuals to go and figure this stuff out. Because the figuring out is where the important stuff is happening. That exploration is where that identity, the important stuff with that identity is happening. And you can see that's a constant theme throughout. So that was a constant theme in Erickson. He said that exploration was key. That's a constant theme in Marcia, saying that exploration is key. And when we look at these factors that affect identity development, it's a constant theme there too, that exploration is kind of key for identity development. So this ends our lecture on chapter 12 and our specific lecture on identity development. Thanks.